The serial killer Richard Cottingham, who is now 76 years old and already spending life in prison for the 1967 to 1980 murders of 18 women and girls, shocked the world in 2009 when he confessed that he murdered as many as 100 women. In 2022, he pleaded guilty to the rape and violent murder of Diane Cusick in 1968 and was sentenced to an additional 25 years to life in prison. The case was solved not because he provided the authorities with the name and details, but rather due to advancements in forensic technologies that are causing quite a buzz and solving many mysterious cold cases quite fast. The authorities in New York and New Jersey are also reportedly close to pinning him down for other cold cases involving missing and murdered women and girls, even though many doubt that he killed as many as 100. The big question that currently lingers on the minds of the families of many still missing and presumed dead women and girls, and murdered ones in the state of New York and even neighboring states is, was Cottingham the monster who kidnapped and murdered their loved ones too? Or is he bluffing and lying, killing as many as 100? The mysteries of a sick serial killer. Richard Francis Cottingham, who is also known as the New York Ripper, the Torso Killer, and the Times Square Killer, is perhaps one of the most sadistic and vicious American serial killers and rapists to ever exist. So far, the authorities in New York proved that he was behind at least 18 murder cold cases involving young women and girls from New York and New Jersey that took place between 1967 and 1980. In 2009, Cottingham told a journalist that he committed at least 80 to 100 perfect murders of females in various places across the United States. We are not experts. However, his criminal history and profile, confessions, and the horrific nature of his rape and murder crimes point that Cottingham is not lying, and that he probably killed regularly, since he became addicted to bondage pornography as a teenager, and as a result a sex addict with a very sadistic appetite. However, he probably was not aware of many, if not most of his victims' identities, because thousands of women and girls were, and still go missing in the U.S. every day. And during the 1960s to the 1980s, there were on average more than 100 murders taking place across the U.S. every day. Additionally, many thousands of women and girls are still missing from the period of 1967 to 1980, which represents the year in which he made his first kill, and the year he was captured, respectively. The fact that there was also no internet and that he also probably disposed of some of the victims in rivers, lakes, the Atlantic Ocean, and other places means that he probably did not bother to learn about the identities of most of his victims, nor he cared because, to him, they all represented nothing to him, other than a quick fix for his rather satanic ritualistic sexual appetite. He also had an appetite for prostitutes who rarely use their real names during work in the sad and horrific sex industry. Criminal history. Before being caught in 1980 for a series of horrific murders, Richard Cottingham was arrested several times for minor crimes such as drunk driving and shoplifting. However, in two different cases that took place in 1973 and 1974, he was arrested after prostitutes lodged complaints to the police about being abused by him during sexual encounters. Both cases were dismissed because the complainants did not appear in court. Cottingham's first known murder took place on October 28, 1967, when he was only 20 years old. The fact that he left his victim, 29-year-old Nancy Chevey Vogel, a mother of two, nude and bound in the back seat of her car near Ridgefield Park, hints that it was not his first time, and predatory in nature. The fact that he was not convicted of murder until August 2010 points that he had experience and knew how to erase evidence from the crime scene. In fact, he was so careful. His second murder of 23-year-old Diane Cusick on February 15th, 1968 was not solved until June 2022. And once again the victim was found in the back seat of her car, raped, beaten, and strangled. and also near where she disappeared during a shopping trip to Green Acres Mall and Valley Stream. His precision, style, and sickness combined mean that these two first murders, which took place only 4 months apart, were not his first, but also that his average number of murders per year hovered around 4. Indeed, if we calculate the number of years from the known first murder in 1967 to his capture in 1980, we can conclude that his number of victims is quite high, and somewhere around 92, which would explain his boasting around killing 80 to 100 women during his career as a serial rapist and vicious murderer. Additionally, since, as we explained earlier, that his first murder was not that of a novice, it means that he accumulated a few other victims before, and these crimes were probably messy and not comparable to his other murders that began in 1967. Perhaps the fact that Cottingham changed his methodology in committing the murders on a regular basis was one of the reasons that many of those victims were never found or identified as his altogether, which would explain why the number of killings he boasted about differ from that uncovered by the authorities so far. Evidence of such shifts in Cottingham's murder style is noted in the double murder case of 22-year-old sex worker D.D. Goodarzi and another unidentified victim who is estimated to have been as young as 16. He raped and tortured them in a room at the Travel Inn Motel near Times Square on December 2, 1979, about 2 years after his murder of Mary Ann Carr in the parking lot of the Quality Inn Motel in Hasbrook Heights in December 1977. The two young women were found headless and handless in what seemed as not just a shift in his style, but also an attempt to make the identification of the victims as difficult as possible. This earned him the name of the Torso Killer. This sudden change was obviously not planned and probably seen as a sudden necessity by Cottingham, because he was seen one night before the murder with his victim D.D. Goodarzi at the motel's bar. This also meant that he was getting sloppy because he called his killing spree perfect murders during interviews, and hence being seen with one of the victims in the bar a day before the double murder was his first serious mistake. On May 5, 1980, Cottingham murdered 19-year-old Valerie Ann Street, who was the motel housekeeper in the Hasbrook Heights Quality Inn. Her hands were tightly handcuffed behind her back, and she was left under the bed to be found by the other housekeepers. Police would later lift a fingerprint matching Cottingham from his particular murder scene, which was the only fingerprint successfully found from any of his known murderers. This enabled the authorities to link him to the 1977 murder of Mary Ann Carr, who was left in the same motel's parking lot. Unfortunately, just before the authorities were able to link him to the murders, he committed another quite heinous murder that took place on May 15, 1980. The victim was Jean Rayner. She was found strangled and her throat cut in New York's historic Seville Hotel. Cottingham went a step further in her case with his sadistic rituals and desperate attempts to cover his tracks and to elude authorities because he severed her breasts and posed them on the headboard of the bed and set fire to the mattress under her body before fleeing. It was not until 2014 that Cottingham admitted to more murders by naming other victims. He identified 3 teenage female victims that he killed between 1968 and 1969. Jacqueline Harp, aged 13 in 1968, Irene Blaze, aged 18 in 1969, and Denise Valeska, aged 15 in 1969. In April 2021, Cottingham confessed to the unsolved 1974 double abduction, rape, and forcible drowning murders of 16-year-old Lorraine Marie Keller and 17-year-old Mary Ann Pryor. This was the first time he confessed to using drowning to kill his victims. This also represented yet another intentional deviation from his standard methods. In August 2022, Cottingham confessed to the murder of 26-year-old Lorraine McGraw, who was beaten and killed on March 1, 1970. In December 2022, Cottingham was convicted of Diane Cusick's 1968 murder, and also admitted to killing another 4 women from 1972 to 1973 in Long Island, New York. They were Mary Beth Hines, Laverne Moy, Sheila Heyman, and Maria Emerita Rosado Neves. Fall of the Monster. On May 22, 1980, Cottingham picked up the sex worker, 18-year-old Leslie Ann Odell. Later, they checked into the same Hasbrook Heights Quality Inn where he murdered Valerie Street. Soon he put a knife to her throat and snapped handcuffs on her wrists and began torturing her and nearly bit off one of her nipples. Her cries of pain became so loud that the motel staff, already uneased by the previous 2 murders of Carr and Street, called the police and then rushed to the room demanding that Cottingham open the door. He was apprehended in the hallway by arriving police officers. He had handcuffs, a leather gag, 2 slave collars, a switchblade knife, replica pistols, and a stockpile of prescription pills. Today, Cottingham is 76 years old, and the authorities are still trying to extract more names from him. The question here is, will they succeed in identifying the many other women and girls he murdered? The only certain thing about this monster is that he is taking his time and playing the authorities, because he knows that once he is done confessing, any privileges he currently enjoys to keep him safe and healthy will be lifted, and he will probably be killed under mysterious circumstances once put in a prison ward with the general prison population. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and ring the bell to get notified every time we upload a new video.